Hello, everyone. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving holiday and looking forward to Christmas. I wanted to tell y'all today about two movies that I love. I was going to go in a direction of one of my favorites of Gladiator or Braveheart, but those were taken and great movies in their own right. But I decided to go in a different direction. The sports movies of Remember the Titans and Invincible. I think both storylines key in on triumph, and I think they both do a great job. They're both done by Disney, slightly done in a different way, and I'll tell you why I like one film more than the other. So let's get right into it. Next slide. In the art section, I think the biggest difference as far as what the art director's direction was for these films was, and Remember the Titans, it's a broader sense of the story in is that it's about a community. It's about T.C. Williams High School. There's never, I would say Denzel Washington is the main character, but there's three main storylines that the whole movie portrays. And as far as art goes, it's very realistic in its kind of sets and props. I don't know if you can see the picture there, but it's about a football camp, and they, all dirty and stuff. So I've been a part of a football team in the past, and I can tell you that you definitely, I could definitely see the realism when I was watching that movie. Like, yeah, that's how it was. I think they did a great job in just how portraying Virginia high school football by using the scenic construction and just it really captures the heart of the civil rights movement. It's very colloquial and authentic in its artwork. I think the art director did a great job. In the movie Invincible, I think it was a larger than life feel almost. It was person centric, based around the actor Mark Wahlberg, who plays Vince Papale. Both of these movies are actually true stories, and the reason why I think the artist gives a larger than life feel is because it's focusing on one person, Vince Papale, overcoming triumph and kind of representing the area of South Philly. Like, a lot of the story talks about him overcoming stuff, and people still in his neighborhood are struggling, but he's like a representative or a shining knight on a white horse that represents their struggles and how to overcome it. And I think that's kind of how the art director framed it. And it's very similar as far as the artwork go, and a little bit of the storyline and how it tells the story through the artwork in the movie franchise Rocky, if you're familiar. Both from Philly, very triumph-oriented films. And I think both of these movies did a great job in using the artwork. One more community and storyline as a whole centric, and Remember the Titans, very realistic and authentic in its artwork. And in Invincible, it was larger than life, focusing on one person representing a large group of people instead of a large group of people representing a particular action or situation. So let's just go to the next slide. Camera work. As sports films, it's sometimes very hard to make a consistency and flow from one cut to another because there's so many moving parts. And obviously in these sports films, you have to depend on wide shots to get a large body of work, a lot of moving parts and people. And I think in Remember the Titans, it heavily used wide shots to cover the actions of the people and cover the large community aspect, what I was talking about before. It did go into medium shots and close-ups during the dialogue and different situations. Like all films, it did a good job, but I think it covered a little more about the football aspect than Invincible. I think Invincible did a great job, but since it was focused on Vince Papale, it used medium and close-ups a lot more. It was more about the storyline of overcoming the circumstances of his situation than it was about football. It was, of course, in Remember the Titans about overcoming a situation and finding unity, but I think it was less about the particular development of one person. So it used a lot more wide shots and medium shots in Remember the Titans as opposed to Invincible. And Invincible, if you as you watch the film, you'll notice a lot of the development and the camera work happens in a bar or a restaurant. And from watching the movie Groundhog Day, you'll notice that the development of characters will happen a lot of times in those restaurant things. I think in this film, the character Vince Papale really grows, and you see the turning points happen a lot of times in these restaurants. Whereas in Remember the Titans, it happened more on the football field and as a team. In this next slide, I'll show you. It's a video of a particular practice and how it was a turning point in the movie. Each and Own does a great job in the camera work, but as I've said before, it's different in the fact of person-centric than group-oriented. So let's just go into the next slide and watch this video. All right, let's see. If y'all would just go ahead and hit play, and I'll just do a little commentary. This is during summer camp and summer football camp, and kind of the turning point of where two race groups come united together, because at first they were separate and now they're coming more united. Sorry, I was going to turn off the volume so y'all can just listen it on your, and there won't be a lot of static. And you see, you use the close-ups and the medium close-ups to get the detail, but during the football scenes, you'll see a lot of wider views and medium shots to kind of tell the unity. A lot of flashing back and forth between characters. You'll see very rarely is in this movie is it ever just focused on one person. It's the development of a lot of characters in a whole and a unity. And I think it did a very good job in these scenes, and you can see the turning point happening, and it's a really good movie. I would recommend it if you haven't seen it to watch it. I'm gonna be quiet now so you can watch the show. Sorry. Love that scene. You can see them uniting. I've played sports all my life, and it's crazy how sports can unite a people group in a way that you never thought could be possible. Just a really, really well done movie, and as you can see, it's a real huge turning point in that particular film. All right, let's go to next slide, please, and talk about the electrical and the grip, which is kind of the continuation of the camera work. And Remember the Titans, as I've said, it's a lot more football-centric and about a group. So to cover that, you have to dolly and truck. I guess they were moving up now to cover these shots. And I think to give the natural look, it used a lot more natural light than artificial, as opposed to Invincible, which I think used a little more of artificial light because it was in a city atmosphere as opposed to out in the country, which was this in Alexandria, Virginia, where the Remember the Titans was filmed. The difference between Invincible, you'll see it's surrounded by buildings and shadows. I mean, you're in downtown Philly, so that artificial light, kind of like that Rocky feel, and how like the camera work and the electro and grip were managing as far as the sets and the shading and the different camera movements there. You'll see a lot more close-ups, like I've said, and you'll see person-centric sound. It's a lot about the sound coming from Vince Papale character that is played by Mark Wahlberg, as opposed to the sounds that you heard previously, which is a lot of just pads popping and different things of football in general. It's a lot more focused on the sounds that are coming from Vince Papale and his development as a character. Next slide. Editorial. Let's see. As far as Remember the Titans go, I think it did a better job in the coherency of the flow. I think it's one of its greatest attributes, and the reason why is you never can, predict what's going to happen, and I think that's a good way that the editing department can function. It does a good job. It's very good flow. It's never breaking up like in separate stories, but it kind of all just works together in the flow of it. It's a lot more realistic and authentic. The colors was just a more natural feel. Like, I guess the viewer and the audience could be immersed by the editing department. Does such a good job in immersing the audience in a down-to-earth feel, and it really related to me as a viewer. I think that this is the goal of the director. I think to a degree people can relate to that type of story of coming together in unity of a large group of people, especially if you've played sports in the past. Invincible, I used a little more editing techniques. I think it actually did a better job. I necessarily didn't like the flow as much because it was a more predictable format. But as far as the CGI and the different effects of slow-mo of different things, it did a lot better job in using that to give the detail to the character Vince Papale, especially when he's going through training camp with the Eagles. You'll see a lot of slow-mo, and I'll show you this next video, which is one of the turning points where he kind of loses his love for the game of football, and he's separating himself from his community in Philly. And he goes back to the old neighborhood, and they're playing football just like he used to before he tried out for the Eagles. And you'll see they use different editing techniques to give a turning point symbolism of the movie. And I'll show you this right now. Let's just go to the next, and I'll kind of talk you through it. All right. If you would push play, we'll get this started. Yep. So this is him going back to the old neighborhood, and he's down on his luck. And before he returns to the climax, you got to kind of just find who he is as a character, and you'll see that in this scene. And I'll let you watch it and see what I'm trying to talk about as far as the editing department and how it shows the turning point of the character Vince Papale. And he comes out and wants to play with his old crew. So I'll let you watch this. As a country kid playing football, that was always one of my favorite times, is just playing sports in the snow, in the rain. You're just getting all dirty. It's just for the love of the game. And this scene does a great job in kind of bringing back to the character Vince Papale of why he's playing the game and who he's representing when he goes out and plays for the Eagles, and what he's overcome and what this city and those people have overcome. Because during this part of the movie, or this whole movie in general, they're down on their luck. A lot of these characters don't have jobs. They're going on strike, so they see Vince Papale as a symbol of triumph by, being a substitute teacher and trying out and getting on the team for the Philadelphia Eagles. And he kind of lost his way, and this is the scene where it's kind of turning point. He comes back to the old the yard and just tossing the pigskin around with his boys, and it's just a great scene. And the editing does such a good job of making this particular scene flow and using slow-mo and different techniques of shading and sounds, and it's just such a good scene. I was wondering in the scene is the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, what he would say if he knew he was playing pickup tackle football with his friends in downtown Philly. I doubt he would like that very much, but you're trying to tell a story as a director, so you don't worry about stuff like that, and I'm sure he wouldn't tell anyway. Never noticed, but pretty much basically this whole scene uses editing techniques as far as the flow and the coherency. It's like basically all slow-mo. I guess it really shows the turning point as a character and just the detail of Vince Papale, playing the game he loves and representing all these different characters, and it's just an awesome scene. I would recommend, if you have seen or haven't seen, to watch these movies back to back to kind of get a feel for the differences and similarities. And both are great films. Recommend them. Uplifting films, both true stories. In fact, great films on football. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it, but just fantastically done films. Both done by Walt Disney Pictures. And they do a great job. So if you want to go ahead and stop it, and we'll go to the next slide. All right, sound and music. The reason why I think Remember the Titans does a better job is, one, it leans on it more as far as the sound and music, especially the music part of it. There's a scene where they're in the locker room and they sing the Marvin Gaye classic "Ain't No Mountain High Enough," and that was kind of a uniting force. I think music can unite people, and I think the viewers of this movie can see that by the use of music. It unites the players, and it united the whole county, because this is during the civil rights of the early 70s, and I think this did a great job of using the music in this film to show the unity of the players and characters. In The Invincible, I think music and sounds were used. They were a heavy factor, but they were more used to complement Vince Papale's character and what he was doing. Like, he was running down, like kind of Rocky, down the streets training, and you'll hear the song played in the background, or maybe a song while he's hanging out with his friends as they're like cutting to another scene. But it never was necessarily a focus. It used great sounds. It focused on Vince Papale's character. You could see the detail of him breathing heavy during training camp, of all this different struggles and stuff. And I think that's why the sound focused, because it wanted to portray its struggles. But if you could push play to the bottom of the screen, and it shows how the music of Remember the Titans was used as a unifying factor, and push play and we'll show why. It's a great scene of it's really funny, actually. They wanted to do something a little different, and they wanted to warm up in their own special way. Some of those guys got pretty bad moves, but it's a funny scene. Kind of shakes up the opposing team. They're like, what the heck's going on? But it's a really good scene. We'll just go ahead and next slide. But as you can see in that particular scene, it's a unifying factor that they're going to do things their own way. They're the only co-racial team in the district, and they had to do they did stuff a little differently to unify as a team, and one of which was going and starting out in that song. And I think the creative department of the Sound of Music did a great job in Remember the Titans in portraying that. The last slide, summary. Both these films did a wonderful job in telling the story of triumph, but in The Invincible, it used the detail of the camera work and the larger-than-life editing. I think the editing and the camera work and the lectural grip, all the different creative department factors was person-centric and platform. It was focused on the character development of Vince Papale. I think the reason why is, yes, there was other characters around, but Vince Papale was the character that fueled the development of all the other characters. It was their symbol. Because he did well and got on the Eagles team, he represented overcoming the struggle of different characters, and you could see that in that film. And ultimately is representing the triumph of the whole community that he was from, but mostly it was person-centric on Vince Papale. But I think overall, in the creative departments and especially the storyline, I think Remember the Titans was a better film. It was smoother in editing. It was less predictable also. The camera and art departments really did a good job in focusing on the detail, and it gave a realistic and authentic feel. I think that was the biggest thing for me. When I watched that, I could almost see the characters and see how they related to me, because I played all these different sports in high school, and it's such a unifying factor that everybody comes from different backgrounds and different situations, and this was a very stressful situation, combining a black school and a white school, making a football team. And you see the characters, and they just have such a realistic, and the creative department does such a good job in portraying the storyline of unity, of coming together and unifying, and then going out and triumphing. And they end up, I'm gonna just tell you, they end up, believe it or not, they end up winning the state final, and it's just such a great story of coming together. And if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. Denzel Washington is probably, even though the three main characters of Gary Bertier, Coach Hoyle, and Coach Boone, which is played by Denzel Washington, those are the three main characters. They're all focused on their stories, and I think there's characters around them, but as a film, they follow them personally, and all of them separate stories. At the end, they come together and they triumph in different ways. And I think the creative department and the director knew that that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to develop each prime character, the three most important characters, and at the end see how they each triumphed in a different way. And I think that was another way that the director showed unity. And at the end of the film, it's just really heartwarming in different ways. I'm not going to spoil this one because it's my favorite. So please, if you can only see one of the films, watch Remember the Titans. You'll see, because just the smoothness of the flow and the editing, the camera and art department display such a realism and authentic, and kind of gets the viewer and the audience just immersed into the storyline. And Remember the Titans is truly a film you'll remember. Invincible is great, but if I had to choose, Remember the Titans is my favorite of all time as far as sports movies go. And thank y'all so much for letting me talk about these two movies I'm passionate about. I love comparing them. I love watching films and seeing the similarities and differences and examining. I think this class makes me more aware of the creative departments and the way they use different factors to develop the story and relate to the audience. So thank you so much for viewing this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you haven't seen the films, please do. God bless, and I hope everyone has a Merry Christmas.